Yeah, the previous person that I've investigated on my channel was Knox of some sort. Adam Knox, there we go. Thank you, memory, for working. And it did come off to be rather strange that their opinions were very much set in stone and very unflexible, and that they were selling you the idea that this is exactly how it is and not what I believe. But then it has come to my attention when I investigated this channel just a tiny bit further, is that he is trying to sell enlightenment. Effectively, what his whole channel is just an advertisement platform for, first of all, a $3 for your first module and then $19 a month to receive all of your remaining lessons from our beautiful cult leader over here, and access to his private Facebook group, I believe, and these kind of things. I do not shame people for selling their spirituality because we all need money to survive. I sell tarot readings, for God's sakes, and I don't sell tarot readings because I am greedy. I sell tarot readings because I need to supplement my regular job income just to survive. If one of you really needs a read and you can't afford it, I can do it for free. Just like send me an email or something. I don't turn people down. It's just I do need that money. So I don't blame him for selling this, but the issue is with selling something like this and for advertising it is that if you go to witchcraft Reddits, a lot of people go, oh, I can't afford to be a witch. It is so expensive. I got myself a tarot set and I got myself witch starter packs, which effectively is people bundling together herbs and some candles and sending it to you. Or you need to pay money to access this information, pay money to access that information. And I am not that rich. When did it all become about capitalism? So I am here to tell you, honey, that this has never been about capitalism and that you can't actually sell enlightenment. He will probably give you a viewpoint of some sorts. He will probably explain something that he sees from his perspective or from his belief perspective, but you don't need all of this. You don't need all of this to actually do magic or to get a perspective. This is something that someone should buy if they're interested in hearing that point of view, but you should never think that, oh, this point of view will literally make me good at this shit or get me to being enlightened. Nobody can do that. Don't pay attention to people that tell you that they absolutely can. They cannot. And this isn't the one path that everybody has to take, and this isn't a necessary purchase, is what I'm saying. If you're intrigued in this, if you want to hear this person's viewpoint, go ahead, buy it. I mean, I have plenty of magic works. Some of the books that I own I really like and they used quite a few times, and other things I just read once and put away. I was mostly doing it to support the person that made said books because I thought that it was something that might be useful to me, therefore they deserve my money, but it wasn't a necessity. And I think that this is where the situation gets a bit scummy, if anything, because new people come in and they look at his channel and then they go to his website and then they go, oh, if I want to do magic, then I should be paying this guy $19 a month. And no, that is not how any of this goes. Before I progress into talking about things that you can do absolutely for free, let's just... The video really made me laugh, so I really wanna play it. explain to me what is being sold here, judging from the video? Because remember that this isn't a channel intro, this is a product. If I wanted to sell a product or a module explaining magic to you, I would probably sit down and try to explain to you what is gonna be in the module that I am attempting to sell. From the video, I am gonna assume that the modules are as follows. Running in the woods in your underwear, wearing leaves and a sheet while sitting in a meditation pose on a rock, juggling fire. This is like primary skill that you absolutely have to do. Scratching trees. We're gonna like learn how to scratch trees really appropriately. And eventually, when you pass all of that and you said hello to the person with the Anubis mask, you can then set teddy bears on fire. It's like very important as a life skill, like setting teddy bears on fire is a great thing to know how to do. And just for free, I can tell you it involves matchstick and a teddy bear. But okay, so if you're gonna just, this is just advice to anyone thinking of selling products. If you think about selling products, please make a video that's not visually appealing. I don't really care if it's visually appealing. Please make a video that really encompasses your product. Otherwise, I am gonna be very confused as to what it is you're trying to sell me. Are we all gonna just go into the woods to scratch some trees? Because I think that we're all gonna go into the woods to scratch some trees, you know? Now, for the other part of my video, which is free witchcraft. So, okay, how do you start if you want to start things, right? Where do you begin? If you're not gonna go on Etsy and you're not gonna grab a whole bunch of herbs, and if you're not gonna go onto various dubious sites and pay people $19 per month, what are you gonna do? Well, first of all, try meditating. I'm saying that because for a lot of people, they reach places that they shouldn't do just on that step. Like, meditation was adapted as a wellness practice because for most people it will not hurt them as a wellness practice. But then you start having like wellness centers that focus on meditating and being present, and a couple of people will always be thrown into the light tunnels and go, hey, what was that thing that I just saw? And everybody will look at them like, what? Crazy. So meditating is always a good place to start, no matter you do start encountering light tunnels or not. If you do, don't be scared. It just means that you may as well be starting to read up on astral projection and figure out all the nice things that you can go inside your mind, because that is always fun. And if you're not that gifted, don't worry, that's completely fine. But you do want to master the element of quieting your mind and being present in the moment while not really thinking about it. It's kind of like switching to a tiny bit of a different state, and some people do that through drugs. Other people inhale far too much smoke, honestly. That's probably me, considering that I keep on burning shit. But it helps. It helps to be not so focused on the physical while also being able to notice precisely everything that is happening in it. Another thing that helps is noticing things in general, being very present. For that, one of my friends helped me. I use the term friend really loosely. I just call people that I encounter friends because I have been in contact with them for quite some time at one point in my life. He has done a little splitting exercise where you just try to increase your ability of being in the moment. And you do this by, for example, if you are listening to music, listen to music that has multiple tracks at once. The drums, the guitar, the singer, the violin. The more instruments, then better. And focus on one of those instruments and see if you can make it louder in your brain to a point where you drown out the rest. And then refocus back on the whole track. Like, lose that instrument and then pick a new instrument and just follow that instrument. Just listen to those notes. Another thing would be to compare two colors that are incredibly similar in shade and make your mind specifically meld them together and seeing the differences. It's mostly because the more you practice seeing the differences in things and how they're similar and how they're different, the more things around you you're gonna be noticing. And it's just good practice for not being lost inside the slog that is the regular life that people just drag on through, but to being able to stop and appreciating the moment. Because if you want to do any kind of working, you will be needing to be able to focus on the working that you're specifically doing and not on literally everything else that is happening around you. So it's just a good skill to have. Now, let's say you want to work on with a deity, a demon, an angel. Trust me, I do not judge the forces that I work with. Other people would not like. You don't know how. How do you reach out to them? Well, you have a name, presumably, because presumably you know who you want to work with. You could potentially Google up the mythos to read up a little bit about them, but you could also come into this with no expectation and just quieten everything, sit down to have your, what I call, daily meditation, and just focus on that name and try calling them. Just try ringing that specific being by just specifically focusing on their name. Sometimes they will not just have a name, they will have a symbol. You can add that. Normally people add candles or scents and so on and so forth, but the candles and scents are just there for you to get into the mood, to get closer to the right mindset that you would have to have in order to interact with that specific being. It's not necessarily for them, it's more for you. You don't... The color green does not specifically call to a god. It is you that associates that god name with the color green, and therefore being in a room that's full of green helps. That sort of thing. So you don't need it. Just quieten down. Try your best. Reach out to them. And chances are, there three things might happen. One, you may be left on ignore, in which case you could try again and again and again to see if eventually you come through, or you could take that as a sign of, hey, they don't want to work with me, and leave that alone. You might feel like you are hearing things and it won't actually be a sound, it's more like a thought that's not your own. In that case, congratulations, you have established pretty good contact. You might feel like you are feeling things, warmth, cold, emotions. Sometimes you feel like there's anger, in which case leave them alone. Sometimes you will feel like you're being listened to, in which case talk, express your desire, which normally at the start would be like, hey, I would like to work with you. Could you impart me with the knowledge of the best way to do this? In which case you might end up with a dream or just a feeling of, hey, if I go out and I sit below willow trees at 3 p.m. at daytime, I think this is the best way for me to establish contact. There's gonna be all sorts of quirks to every single different entity of some sorts, but you can establish that through that communication and move with how it feels like to you. Once again, so far we have included nothing that you can purchase. We are talking about works that are absolutely 100% free. Now, a popular tactic that is used in order to manifest your desires is sigils, and I use quite a lot of them because it normally works quite well for me. I gotta say, I don't know how well one of these is working, but hey, I have received reviews from people that I thought would never play my game, so I suppose it is doing its job. But normally, it works really well for me, and it's not necessarily everyone's tools. It's not necessarily everyone's preference, and everybody will do their own things differently. And that is another important thing. So if this is not part of what you want to practice, that is completely fine. But I can just demonstrate a couple of my drawings of what I would do if I want to make a sigil. None of these are harmful, so don't worry about staring at them. All of them had very specific purposes. Some of them was to decrease the amount of evangelical spam that I was getting. Another thing was to soften up my bosses, which worked pretty well, honestly. There has been one to cut away the people that no longer serve me because, well, I kind of had to leave their space in order to defend one of my friends, and I felt a lot better after making that sigil, so take it for what you want. So first of all, you wanna assemble a sentence of what you want. You might not wanna phrase it as in, I'm gonna have a lot of money in the future, I will be rich, because in that case you end up having this kind of running phrase of something will happen in the future, but because the future is not a determined point, it will just continue running. And you might want to go a little bit more in depth than I will be rich. I do not suggest focusing on any sentences that are too broad because they're hard to define and because you're just not gonna get very good results. So instead, phrase your wants to be a bit more realistic, as in, I will get this job that I am going to go for, but instead of going, I will get this job that I'm gonna go for, you go, I am acing that interview, or I got employed at this company. Even past tense is completely fine, as long as it's not phrased off infinite point in the future. So for the bosses one, I went with, my bosses are nicer to their employees, and the next week immediately my bosses are like, oh, these never-ending meetings, they're cancelled and everybody goes back to their regular schedule. You all guys don't need constant supervision, which was a lot nicer because it let me sleep. But you want to get a sentence of desire of something that you want, and you want to make it fairly specific. And in some cases, it might be a better idea to boost yourself rather than the objects that you're seeking. So, for example, instead of saying, I am getting an A on this test, saying, I am filled with determination to study with this test, without my attention wandering even, is a much better sentence. Try not to make the sentence a negative, because adding a not into the sentence can sometimes make it happen, because the universe is a fickle being and negatives are hard to understand. So, I am not getting an F on this test is not a good sentence. I am getting an A on this test is a good sentence, but I would recommend focusing on your inwards qualities that will allow you to focus on your studying more than I would about the outcome of the test. You get my drift. Now, when you have that sentence, you want to take out all of the, I think they're called vowels. A, E, I, O, those letters. I think we class them as vowels and syllables. You want to take out all the vowels. And then you want to take out all of the repeating letters. So what you're gonna get left with is a word mash. And now, just not even a word mesh, but just like a letter mesh, just like a line of spaghetti letters. And then you want to put your desire onto paper. Normally, you want to go with a shape that is easy for your mind to understand, but I do not follow this specific instruction. I sometimes make it fairly artistic just because I like the way that it looks and it works for me, but normally you're advised to go simple. The simpler for you to understand the general shape, the better. So after you drew a picture, this is what a more complex shape would look like. This is what a more simple shape would look like. That one specifically I'm using for protection, and by the way, it worked pretty well. I have not been chased in the forest ever since I made that. Sometimes with these it's really hard to tell whether or not they're working because you're like, hey, I want to feel safer and more protected, you know. I am safe and protected, and I push away all attacks, and then you don't get attacked from that point on, and you're like, is this working or is this chance? But nah, I made this summer and I didn't get harassed since, so I'm just gonna proclaim it a success for now. So you put your letter mesh into a picture. Now it's time to put the picture away. By the way, normally you're supposed to charge the picture, but if you put in enough unbridled focus while drawing it, your focus is kind of charging it. You put the picture away until you forget what the heck you drew or why you drew it for. The rest of this is theoretical because in my practice I no longer need to follow these exact steps as I have a stack of sigils. But hey, it's good to follow the proper method until you figure out where exactly you can cut corners in order to make shit still work. By this point, we have expanded into practices that require you to possibly have a little bit of paper and a pen, so hopefully you had that. Now what you want to do, when you completely forgot what the heck you drew or why, so you might want to put down the problem out of your head that you drew the thing for, you want to get yourself to an altered state where you can just imprint this into your mind. This is once again why I said you might want to start with meditation. And there's some extreme ways that people do this, such as stopping themselves from breathing until they think that they're gonna pass out and then flashing the picture in front of their eyes. Just imprint it deep into your brain as like a little chipset for a little robot of you must do this and you must, the universe must comply to this, so I am gonna act in my own favor to cause this to happen. Normally, you're not supposed to use sigils to manipulate other people, only it's more of an inwards thing, but more outwards desires have worked for me, so if you want a more outwards desire, as I said, make my bosses nicer, that has absolutely nothing to do with me, but it still worked. So, maybe don't stop breathing. There's more lewd thing that you can do so that at the end of the very lewd thing, you can also imprint it into your mind, just like at that highest point when your eyes are trying to roll back into your head, if you ever get that sensation. But I'm not in the favor of the lewd thing either. You can just sit down and you can meditate to a point where you manage to stop the world around you and you feel like you're in a completely different state, and then you can gently open your eyes and imprint the little instruction chipset directly into your brain canal, and then you're advised to get rid of the picture. Just burn it. Dunk it in water. You might not want to throw it away because that keeps it intact. I burn mine, but I only burn them when I get too many of these in a stack. And I effectively go, hey, it's time for cleaning. Why do I have so many of my little sigilized arts projects? But this is a more traditional method. Unless you try and experiment with shit and figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, you will find that it is completely different person to person. And that, once again, I am ignoring the big no-nos of no manipulating other people. It's not like I am trying to very specifically set a very specific instruction set into another person of like love me and adore me. It's more of a general things. You could say that I am not getting harassed in the streets. It's more of a other people instruction chipset than it is mine, for example. So hey, even if it's a no-no, feel free to experiment with it. As for activating and destroying the sigil, as I said, in my own practice, I don't need to do it at all. It doesn't do anything for me. I can just get running and it's completely fine. So you might find the need that you do need to go through the whole process of figuring out what you're drawing, then forgetting it, then implanting it into your brain, and then destroying it. Or you might figure out that just the drawing bit is enough, or you might figure out that you might actually need to draw it and then leave it to charge off your energy or flash it into yourself multiple times before you destroy it. Everybody kind of has a bit of a different process, but hey, this is a rundown of a simple process that you can do with a pen and paper, and you can just start experimenting. So I gave you a basic idea on little things that you can do on a bit of sigil-based magic, because that is a lot of what I do. How to contact beings, if you wanna specifically do that. And now remember that another little bit about toolless magic, because not everybody will be able to get tools, is if you read about a very specific ritual that somebody wrote that includes herbs and candles and altars and knives and whatever, and you do not have that, you can try and replicate the ritual by going through the steps in your head. You can imagine the altar being there and imagine the herbs being there and go through the process. It's kind of like when people summon very specific entities that they don't consider to be friendly, those that employ protection circles. Some people do actually get a piece of chalk and draw on their floor. Other people imagine the circle being there and the effect works. But you kind of have to be able to keep that whole scene in your brain and keep it pretty vivid, which tends to be fairly difficult for people. So hey, tools are optional, but it makes it easier because it is in your hand and you're doing a thing. And for example, if I have a knife in my hand, which is a regular hunting knife, but it is pretty. I bought it for my practice. I end up using it for scraping wax off my table, pretty much. And sometimes cutting pieces of paper. It's actually kind of nice to have a knife. I don't know how YouTube will react to it, but let's say that I am required in the ritual that I am currently not modifying. Remember that every single piece of media that you read, if you know what you're doing, you can modify it to suit you better. Let's say that they say that we point at all 4 cardinal directions with a knife. Some rituals do, some rituals use a stick or a wand. If you need a wand, by the way, you can go and get a stick from outside. That kind of works. If I have a knife and I am actually pointing in all cardinal directions one after the other, this is a lot easier, for I am already holding it in my hand. I don't need to use my brain power in order to imagine the fact that I have something in my hand that I currently do not, and therefore I do not need to suspend my own disbelief in just the production of the tool itself. So it makes it easier to have tools sometimes, but they're not a necessity. And that is kind of the important bit. They are not a necessity. And if somebody tells you that, hey, I can progress you, I can teach you in magic, give me $19 per month, and you're just a starting practitioner and you're not here to try and learn somebody else's viewpoint, but you literally want to know how to start out and you literally want to know how these things work. Bad deal. I wouldn't go for it, because it is mostly just a bloke trying to make money, and you can get your information from other sources for free, and you can read different viewpoints and figure out what is your viewpoint and what is the appropriate practice for you, without trying to adopt another guy's practice word for word. Because remember, what works for some people will not work for other people. So I hope that my ramble has been helpful in some way. I am going to go back to speedrunning my work for I still have about 4 hours of it remaining, and I kind of also want to get to my tarot orders today. My days, they're not very interesting. They're not very spectacular, I must tell you, outside of the fact that I get to dress however I want, to have a lot of freaky shit in my house. I smell nice now because I bought a whole bunch of perfumes recently, and I am currently betting on a very old novel, and hoping that I am gonna win that, because owning a book from 1880s would be friggin' cool. Outside of those things, my life is really not that entertaining, and I must now return to it. So thank you for watching, and I hope I'm gonna see you next time.